Chapter 7 The Boiler Room. I figured that the effects of the lair would eventually fade and people would go back to normal again, so I kept plucking the strings until my mom drove down the street and I couldn't see her anymore. That lair is some kind of magic weapon, John said. I'm totally going to invent us some super earplugs, Sydney added. I turned to them. I had a vague idea of what we were about to do, and it seemed completely crazy and probably dangerous. You realize this is all nuts, right? The underworlds, the lunch ladies, the weirdo big wolf, the magic lair, this whole mythological thing. Like, we've been eating crazy pudding, said John. Except we don't really have a choice, said Sydney. Exactly, I said, just so we're all on the same page about it. The school was unlocked, which wasn't strange. What was strange was that the instant we stepped inside, the public address system crackled. Owen Brown, report to the office. Why is the office still open? Asked John. And how does anyone know we're here? When we got to the main office, we found the secretary standing at the door with her coat on, ready to leave. Here, she said, dropping something into my palm. The penny, I said, staring down at it. You found Mags's penny with the blue Lincoln hair. The secretary smiled. Under the principal's desk. The collection can is in the safe for the night and won't be out again until the morning. If you want, you can bring this back then. She switched off the office lights, shooed us into the hall, and left the building with a wave. Nice little moment, said Sydney, but we have an underworld to get to. And a Dana to save, said John. I tucked the penny into my pocket. Let's go. We entered the maze of hallways toward the back of the school. The lair glowed eerily under the ceiling lights. Our footsteps echoed off the walls. There was a smell, too. Not coffee from the teacher's lounge, not mashed potatoes from the cafeteria, not cleaning fluid from the janitor's closet. It was the same thing I had smelled when Dana disappeared. Smoke, I said under my breath. We took the stairs carefully and quietly, but I couldn't stop the panic in my chest. Was there really an entrance to the underworlds below our school? Would the lair help us get into it and out of it? Was any of this real? It's locked, said Sydney when we got to the boiler room door. No way can I open this with my toolkit. Maybe the lair could do it, said John. Orpheus charmed rocks and dead stuff, too. I'm not Orpheus, I said, feeling unworthy of the ancient magical instrument in my hands. But I tried it anyway, for a reason I can't explain. My fingers went right to the two highest pitched of the 7 strings. I plucked them one after another, making a simple 2-note melody. Even before the notes faded, the door began to quiver like the surface of a pond. It turned gray, then silver, then white. Then it wasn't there. Whoa, John whispered. You're the Jimi Hendrix of the ancient lair. Probably not. But instead of furnaces and pipes and cables and machines behind the boiler room door, we saw charred trees and giant boulders surrounded by hills of rough black earth. The sky, if that's what the ceiling of the boiler room had become, stormed with fiery clouds. I went cold all over. This couldn't be true. This was beyond impossible. It was terrifying. We stood on the edge of the creepy landscape, staring and unable to move, until we heard the soft lapping of water. Dana's book tells about a river dividing the living and dead. Sid said softly, You have to cross it to get to the land of the dead. It's called the River Styx. John whistled. If Mr. Kenkins only knew what was in his boiler room. Dana's in there somewhere, I said, trying to sound strong. Come on. We followed the sound of the water down a steep black slope to an area of overgrown reeds. The rank smell of a polluted river filled the air. Then the reeds moved, and an ancient man in a droopy hat limped slowly toward us, leaning on a long wooden pole. Before I could do anything, I felt John and Sydney move to stand quietly behind me. The old man stopped and tipped his hat. I'm Sharon, at your service, he said. His voice sounded like gravel rolling in a tin can. You're the ferryman, aren't you? I asked, my words trembling. We read about you. Sharon licked his lips when he saw the lair. I've seen that before, long ago. We need to get across the river, said Sydney, peeking out from behind my shoulder. I mean, sort of, you know. Please? It was the first time I had seen Sydney choke a little. My own fears doubled. Charon kept his eyes on the lair. This way, he said. He turned and hobbled a short distance to the river, then paused. Will you be wanting a round trip, like Orpheus, or a one-way? Round trip, said John quickly. Charon snorted. Optimistic, aren't you? Well, come on, climb aboard the yacht. Tucked among the reeds was not a yacht. It was a raft of soggy planks tied together with frayed rope. When we stepped on, the thing nearly tipped over. But when Charon climbed on, the raft didn't make the slightest dip in the water. The old man had no weight. Hold tight, he said, showing 2 rows of black gums with not a single tooth. Lest you fall among them. They're grabby, you know. John tugged my sleeve. Who's grabby? I didn't know, but when Charon pushed his pole against the shore and the raft floated into the river, we saw them. Human shapes swimming under the waves, their mouths open in silent screams. The recent dead, Charon explained. They haunt the shore, hoping to rejoin the living, fearing to cross to the far side. What will happen to them? Sydney asked. They'll cross, Charon said darkly. They all do. I thought about my grandmother. It had been so hard when she had died 2 years ago. She wasn't even that old. Then she was gone. Would I see her here? Would we see all the dead here? The idea made me shiver, and I clutched the lyre more tightly. Soon we left the shallow waters and the silent souls. For minutes, the only sound was the waves lapping over the planks. Before long, we docked among the reeds on the dead side and got off the raft one by one. Then Charon thrust his hand out at me, palm up. A little something? He asked. I gulped. I had given everything to the charities that morning. Sydney and John shook their heads at me. Charon's old eyes flashed with anger. He turned away. One-way voyage, then. But we have to get home, said John. No exceptions, said Charon. The penny, Sydney whispered, with the blue hair. I dug into my pocket, pulled out Mags's penny, and dropped it into Charon's palm. He grinned. If you come back after work hours, you'll stay here, which means bye-bye to your old lives. No one leaves after I go off duty. 5 p.m. Tipping his filthy hat once more, he waded among the tall reeds and disappeared. This is way scarier than the Runson house, John muttered. We started walking up a rising slope of coal, black ground dotted with leafless dead trees. It took us a minute to get up to the top, where we found ourselves overlooking an enormous arena. It stretched for miles end to end and contained benches filled with millions of hooded, silent figures who sat stiff and unmoving. I couldn't believe it. The dead, I said. So many of them. At the near end of the arena stood what looked like the back of a throne 20 feet high. Someone's big, John said under his breath. Sid gasped softly. That must be Hades' throne. The king of the Greek dead would have a huge throne. Oh, man. There was a long flight of stairs down to the throne. This is for Dana, remember, I said, setting my foot on the top step. But the moment I did, whoosh, the stairs became a slide. We slammed onto our backs and shot all the way down the arena to the bottom. The instant we landed, the giant throne swung around to us, and my heart stopped. In the throne sat an enormous beast. It was shaped like a man, but its skin was as red as a stop sign, and it wore gleaming blood-red armor from shoulders to feet. Its head was a mess of wild flaming horns twisting out of its skin like a thicket. Its eye sockets were as wide as dinner plates and as hollow as tunnels, except for white flames blazing in each. And when it spoke, the air shook. Welcome to my underworld.